Well, hello and welcome to Critical Wave Theory. So, in this episode, obviously, I'm going to be looking at the Queen classic Bohemian Rhapsody, and I have done an episode on this song before, although it had a bit of a twist. I was talking about whether or not the song might be a little bit overplayed and what people thought about that. And sure enough, there are some people out there who just aren't fans of it. They've heard it like a million times. And some people, they do think it's overrated and all of that. But this time we're going to be going basically in the opposite direction because I'm going to be looking at why people do love this song. So the haters, I'm just basically asking you to step aside for this one and just let this one wash over you because these are some uh, good vibes toward the song in this particular episode. So get ready for that. I'm not going to be, criticizing the song at all or anything like that. This is going to be one of those episodes where I'm going to be pouring on the love, maybe a little bit too much. Maybe it'll be too syrupy sweet for you. And I just want you to be prepared for that. There are certain songs that just become hits, but they're not just hits. They're more like cultural landmarks. They're songs that seem to exist in a category all of their own, and certainly Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody is one of those songs. I mean, even if you're a hater of this song, like I talked about just a little bit ago, you've got to admit there's something original about this one. It's just different. There's something different about it. Something special. It was released in October 1975 as the lead single from A Night at the Opera, and Bohemian Rhapsody defied almost every convention of the popular single. It was nearly 6 minutes long. It had no conventional chorus. It moved through multiple musical styles, seemingly with great ease. It featured elaborate vocal harmonies, operatic passages, a dramatic guitar solo or two, and a hard rock section that sounds like several completely different songs stitched together. Like, even that hard rock part, it there's something different about it. I mean, it's a part you could headbang to, but it's not like a conventional rock section. I don't know. It's partly because of everything that comes before it and everything that comes after it, but it just feels more deserved than some other headbanging parts and songs. It's like you worked your way up to that point, and now we're just gonna let it rip. That's what I like about that part, and I think a lot of music fans, they really understand that hard rock can almost be more respectable musically if it's used in an intelligent and unique way. And this song proves it. This song is one of the biggest rock songs in history, of course, and it has appeared repeatedly on lists of the greatest songs ever recorded, including Rolling Stone's 500 greatest songs of all time. And frankly, they would have been stupid to not put this song somewhere at least within the top 10, and possibly in the number one spot, because that's how a lot of people feel about the song, obviously. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Bohemian Rhapsody is that on paper, it sounds like exactly the kind of song that a record company should have rejected. And sure enough, they didn't warm up to it at first. It is a miniature rock opera, really. Bohemian Rhapsody was written primarily by Queen's Freddie Mercury. Now, when it comes to songwriting, it's sometimes a little bit unclear to what extent a person deserves credit for something, but almost everybody seems to agree here that Freddie Mercury is the primary songwriting force for this one, and Mercury was famously secretive about the song's lyrics and the meaning of the song. When asked about it, he generally avoided providing a definitive explanation, once describing it simply as having such a fantasy feel about it. He kind of brushed off the idea of even having to explain this song. It's almost more like the emotional journey is really the point of it. And you do get a sense that there is a story, and of course, he alludes to certain events, like somebody being shot and whatnot. So there is a bit of a story, but it's also a little bit like Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash sometimes mentions a person who loses their life one way or the other, and you don't need the entire life story in order to get a sense of what the song is about. And in a way, the emotion is really one of the main points of this one, and that ambiguity is, it's part of the song's appeal. Rather than following the familiar verse chorus verse structure of a conventional pop single, Bohemian Rhapsody is essentially a through composed piece. Now that means it unfolds in a series of distinct movements. It's not it's not based that much on repetition. There's a lot of variation in the way that it unfolds. It's like a story, that's really what it is like. It begins with a haunting, almost a cappella vocal introduction. Well, I think it pretty much is a cappella, really. From what I understand, that is layers of Freddie Mercury's voice, and you can kind of tell, but it also sounds like different voices too at the same time. Like yes, it's all Freddie Mercury's voice, but he almost seems to be adding variety to those different layers. And then comes a reflective piano ballad with Mercury singing about guilt, regret, and some mysterious crime. And Brian May enters with one of rock's most recognizable guitar solos. And it's further proof that you don't need to have like a zillion notes in order to make a message, because I think Brian May's guitar solo is, actually relatively simple. It's not like he went in there and just shredded up the whole piece. It was very well thought out, and the notes work perfectly for the song. They match the feel of the piano, the mood of the piece. It's all reflected in his note choices, and I don't know to what extent Freddie Mercury devised the solo, but it definitely feels like it matches the rest of the song. There's both an intensity to it, but also, it's very melodic. So it doesn't really go like as crazy on the guitar as some rock songs stereotypically would go. It just perfectly blends in with everything else. And the song, it suddenly transforms with that guitar solo, and it really adds nuance, and a lot of different emotions might hit you. Some of them may be in contradiction, and you'll really get a sense of the power of composition if you listen closely to what is being done with that guitar solo. I mean, the piano is great too, of course, and I don't want to downplay that, but for me, like, this is one of those songs that kind of adequately conveys why a person might want to pick up a guitar in the first place. Um, the operatic section arrives with Mercury, May, and Roger Taylor creating a massive wall of layered vocals. You've got Scaramouche, Scaramouche, will you do the fandango? Obviously, I suck at singing, so I'm not going to try to sing it the way they do. But it's theatrical. There's a little bit of absurdity in it. It gets dramatic. There's almost like a sense of parody at a certain point, and it's completely unlike anything else on the radio. It's it's a strange song actually. And then almost without warning, the opera gives way to that heavy rock section, and finally everything collapses into a quiet, reflective conclusion. But it almost feels like the story isn't over with the end of the song. That's another great thing about it. Like, it's almost like there's a question mark, like there's uh, a little wink at the audience of some type. It's almost a miniature rock opera compressed into less than 6 minutes, and I think that's a remarkable feat. And that title, A Night at the Opera, it wasn't exactly accidental either. Queen was deliberately embracing uh, the theatrical and musical excess. And it's also a nod to the Marx Brothers, believe it or not, because that comedy team had a movie called A Night at the Opera. So there's a little bit of a cinematic nod even in the title of the album. The recording was a little bit of a nightmare too. Like so many great songs, creating Bohemian Rhapsody was an enormous undertaking for 1975. The operatic middle section required an extraordinary number of vocal overdubs. That's a little bit of dyslexia. So it's a good thing I wasn't trying to sing this song at any point because I'd be like suddenly tapping into my dyslexic brain and mangling it and just turning it into unintentional comedy or whatever. So singing requires talent, obviously, for these singers to get everything right, and it most certainly is not the easiest thing in the world because you're trying to sound a certain way, you're trying to convey a certain mood. So all of those different vocal overdubs and the different musical sections, it kind of made for the song uh, a unique opportunity to convey a side of the band that would be very difficult to repeat on stage. And that's why, if you look at the history of the song, it was very rarely played live, if ever. And I think a lot of us give the song a break or give the band a break over that because how do you even successfully duplicate this live and really successfully tap into the original vibe that was captured in the recording, especially when you know that you had all these different layers and it took so much skill and a unique vision in order to successfully convey everything. And you can't necessarily capture that magic in a simple performance on a stage. So Mercury, May, and Taylor repeatedly recorded and layered their voices to create the illusion of an enormous choir, and not necessarily that easy of an undertaking, especially when you're just a rock band. Like they didn't necessarily have that much encouragement to write songs like this, and the process involved bouncing recordings between tape machines again and again. The technology of the period imposed some very real limitations, and actually, the master tape reportedly became so worn from repeated overdubbing that it was becoming physically fragile. So you've got those problems as well. I mean, the fact is that sometimes things get lost in the shuffle and in the process. So they successfully did capture these results. And that alone is a little bit of a struggle sometimes. And producer Roy Thomas Baker, working with Queen, helped turn Mercury's ambitious ideas into something that could actually be recorded. So give a little credit to him as well. The result was one of the most elaborate rock productions of its era and of all time, really. And according to Baker, even the people involved weren't initially sure how the public would react. They took the song to British radio DJ Kenny Everett for some outside advice, and Baker later recalled Everett's reaction. We thought we'd better get some outside advice, so we took it to Kenny Everett at Capital Radio. He said, I love this song. This is so good. They'll have to invent a new chart position. Instead of being number one, it'll be number half. So, you know, there's that's a way of saying that it could be higher than number one somehow. And that turned out to be a pretty good prediction because this is truly one of the most uh, it's just one of the most ambitious songs ever recorded in the rock genre. And you know what? There's that other question. What is a song actually about? That's one question nobody can answer with certainty. The lyrics have generated decades of speculation. You know, you got that line, Mama just killed a man. Who is the narrator? What happened? Who is he talking to? Is he literally talking to his mama? Or is it just him talking to his head, you know, imagining that he's talking to his mama? And what exactly do words like Scaramouche, Galileo, and Bismillah have to do with the story? You know, there have been interpretations involving guilt and redemption, existential crisis. Maybe it's all a dream, and this is the imagery from the dream. It's said that it might be coming of age symbolism, and Mercury's own personal life. You know, I mean, I kind of don't want to get too much into this, but Freddie Mercury was a homosexual man, or some theorize that he was actually bisexual. I don't know. Maybe the song kind of delved a little bit into that. You know, probably not that much. You know that's almost like a little too stereotypical, because obviously there's a stereotype that whenever you're talking about like a gay songwriter or something like that, that all of their songs must be about their their sexual life or something like that. And I don't think that's necessarily always the case. But the point is, it's open to interpretation. Mercury never gave the world a definitive explanation, and perhaps that's exactly how he wanted it. And Bohemian Rhapsody is a perfect example of what is sometimes called the death of the author. The idea that once a work is released, the creator's private interpretation doesn't necessarily determine what the audience is allowed to find in it. You know, the author doesn't matter so much. It kind of becomes a song for the ages and for the masses. And that's kind of when you know you've made it, when you've created a classic, when a song kind of becomes the audience's and it becomes a public possession in many ways. The song belongs to the listener as much as it belongs to somebody like Freddie Mercury or the band. And the record company didn't get the song at first, as I kind of said earlier, and that was another problem. The song was nearly 6 minutes long, which is already a problem for record companies. The conventional wisdom of the music industry was that hit singles were supposed to be short, roughly 3 minutes long, sometimes shorter than that. That's why you have so many songs back in the day that were, well, 3 minutes or shorter. I mean, a few of them were longer than that, and even when they did release a song that was a little bit longer, usually they had a radio edit version and then like the album version. You know, like one was intended as a single to be played on the airwaves, and then maybe the album version would have a little bit more of a length to it, maybe an extra section or two or whatever. But this song, it's almost like you have to play it at its full length, and radio stations needed songs that fit neatly into programming schedules, and record companies wanted something immediately accessible. Bohemian Rhapsody was technically neither. You know, if you listen to it the first time, one of the things you're going to notice, if you have a chance to see the length of the song, is that, wow, this is over 5 minutes long. And EMI executives reportedly had serious doubts about releasing such an unconventional song as a single. But Queen wasn't interested in cutting it down, and Kenny Everett became enormously important. Everett had obtained an advance copy and began playing the song on his radio program. And that's how listeners heard it. They wanted it the way that it was. And suddenly, the supposedly uncommercial song had become one of the most talked about records in Britain. And soon, beyond Britain. And the irony is beautiful. The song's refusal to follow the rules became a part of its commercial appeal. And that happens in other uh, creative formats as well. Sometimes people do like rule breakers, and that's part of what makes something successful. Sometimes, anyway. And there was also a music video that changed everything too. It was another innovation. The promotional film for Bohemian Rhapsody is now regarded as one of the earliest modern music videos. Queen could not simply appear on every television program to perform the song live because, like I said, that's a daunting task. So the band created a visual performance specifically for TV. The video features dramatic lighting, visual effects, and the now iconic image of the four members of Queen arranged in a diamond formation. And there were some very basic studio tricks, some effects to give the video a little bit of flash, and it worked. I from what I understand, the image of Freddie Mercury like duplicating, that was just them recording the monitor, like the video monitor, and sometimes that's easy enough as an effect, something like that. And Roger Taylor later reflected that the band understood there was something important about the visual presentation, even though they didn't fully appreciate how powerful music videos would eventually become. And that turned out to be prophetic. This was years before MTV launched in the United States in 1981, and of course, MTV kind of became a big deal. They were kingmakers in their own right. And this was an example of how a music video could be a part of what makes a band successful. And Bohemian Rhapsody demonstrated that a song could have a visual identity of its own, and that a compelling video could help sell a record without the artist physically performing it on TV every time. And of course, when you appear on TV, sometimes you lip sync, so it's not even like it's fully live anyway. So that's one of the reasons to do a music video instead of a live performance, because a lot of these TV stations at the time, they didn't want to take a chance with a live performance. I mean, you could have the artist do something offensive on stage or say something offensive, so they often played it safe and relied on these lip syncing uh, little theatrical presentations anyway. So why not just record it and do a music video instead of a fake live performance? And the modern music video era was beginning to take shape, and Queen were really there in the early stages of it. And, this was a hit that nobody expected, like I've already said. Despite all the doubts, Bohemian Rhapsody became a massive success. In Britain, it spent 9 consecutive weeks at number one in 1975 and became one of the country's best selling singles. In America, it initially reached number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100. And think about what that means: a nearly 6 minute song with no conventional chorus, multiple movements, an extended opera section, and a hard rock climax had become a mainstream pop hit. That's not something, that's a common story. Queen had essentially taken the conventions of commercial music and just thrown them out the window, and the public followed them. Uh, Maybe not out the window, but they followed along. And unfortunately, of course, Freddie Mercury did die, but Bohemian Rhapsody wasn't finished even with his death. In November 1991, Freddie Mercury, he did die, but the song returned to the British charts and reached number one again, as if they really wanted to recognize the greatness of this song and the greatness that was Freddie Mercury's musical ability. And that gave Bohemian Rhapsody an extraordinary distinction. It became one of the relatively rare songs to top the UK chart twice by the same artist, separated by many years and different circumstances. Then something completely unexpected happened in America. A comedy movie actually brought the song back, Wayne's World. Now, if you've never seen Wayne's World, well, you don't know what kind of success it was in the 90s, but yeah, and people forget about how big Wayne's World was, and how big Dana Carvey was and Mike Myers, but man, they were big in the 1990s, have no doubt about it. And they helped bring the song back. You know, we're not worthy and swing. Everybody was saying that stuff back then, man. It was so common. And a monkey might fly out of your butt. That was another Wayne's World expression. And the 1992 film captured one of the most memorable uses of a rock song in movie history. And apparently, Mike Myers was very insistent on them playing the song in the film. He even threatened to walk away if they didn't have Bohemian Rhapsody, because apparently, and this is kind of a heartwarming story of its own. Mike Myers, when he was younger, in his younger days, he would drive around with his friends in a car very similar to the vehicle that they drive around in Wayne's World, and they would sing along to Bohemian Rhapsody. And he wanted to capture that magic in the movie. And for a lot of people, it really is the most memorable part of the film. It's iconic, even though it's just a simple scene of them like rocking along to the song. It's one of the memorable film moments of the 1990s. And you can kind of understand why Mike Myers insisted that that moment stay in the film. Wayne and Garth are driving around in Wayne's car when Bohemian Rhapsody is blasting through the stereo, and then comes the headbanging. You got Wayne, Garth, and their friends enthusiastically banging their heads along with the song's hard rock section, and then they're sweetly singing the softer parts of the song as well. It's funny, it's ridiculous, and really it introduced Bohemian Rhapsody to an entirely new generation. And it also shows you the power of the rock era. Uh, the power of rock music. It's not just a silly thing, although it is kind of a silly thing at the same time. But it really bonded people together. This musical form, and had unique components to it that even though you could kind of poke fun at the rock era and make fun of some aspects of it, even vilify certain rock stars, but the musical form itself, it's still my favorite musical form. I love how diverse it really is, and this song really does capture the just complex ability with rock music to convey a whole lot of different emotions, and to just convey some timeless feelings. And the song returned to the American charts because of Wayne's World and climbed back into the Billboard top 10. So sometimes a movie can be a hit and give a song a second life, or a TV show that can happen too. So, a song that had already been a classic for nearly 2 decades suddenly became a hit with a younger audience who hadn't even been born when it was originally released. And that's an extraordinary second life for a recording. And a kind of cool part of the legacy of Bohemian Rhapsody. And you could also say a part of the legacy of Saturday Night Live, too. Why not throw that into the mix? So, what makes Bohemian Rhapsody so powerful? Well, I've kind of went into a lot of that already, but it's not simply that the song is catchy. In fact, it's it's almost like it's not as catchy as you might think at first. I mean, even though yes, you do have catchy musical passages and whatnot, the point isn't just that. It's almost the opposite. It's memorable because it refuses to behave like an ordinary song. It combines opera, hard rock, progressive rock, theatrical pop, classical style vocal arranging, and it's a piano ballad. It's all blended into a constantly changing piece of music. And somehow, none of those elements completely overwhelms all the others. It all just fits in perfectly. The song shouldn't work, but it does, and perhaps that's the ultimate lesson of Bohemian Rhapsody. Popular music has rules: 3-minute singles, simple structures, memorable choruses, predictable arrangements. But every once in a while, an artist comes along and they prove that those rules aren't really rules at all. They're just conventions that sometimes you can put aside. Freddie Mercury and Queen took a song that seemed almost impossible to market and turned this thing into one of the most recognizable recordings in popular music. And more than 50 years later, people still know the piano parts, they know the operatic section, they know the kick ass guitar solo stuff, the hard rock explosion, and they know the headbanging scene from Wayne's World, and they know that unforgettable, sad final line about nothing really matters to me. And perhaps that's the greatest irony of all. For a song that once seemed too strange, too long, and too ambitious to be a hit, almost everything about Bohemian Rhapsody ended up mattering.